What if the history we take for granted is incomplete? What if, thousands of years before the first pyramids, a civilization existed with technology that could rival our own? A civilization with flying vehicles, powered by mysterious energy crystals, that disappeared in a single terrible day. This is the story of Atlantis, not as a simple myth, but as a mind-bending possibility of a future that may have existed in our distant past. This isn't just some bedtime story. It's an enigma that has fascinated philosophers, historians, and explorers for nearly 2,400 years. It is a legend that blurs the line between a cautionary tale and a lost chapter of human history. We're about to journey into the heart of this mystery. We'll examine the original texts, explore the incredible technologies tied to this lost empire, and sift through sand and sea for any shred of evidence. Forget what you think you know. The quest for Atlantis begins now. The legend's origin, the philosopher's tale. Our story starts not on a treasure map, but in ancient Athens with one of the most influential thinkers ever, the philosopher Plato. Around 360 BC, Plato introduced the world to the island empire of Atlantis in two of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. That's it. This is the one and only original source. Every movie, every book, every documentary about Atlantis starts right here. Plato doesn't pitch this as a fantasy. He frames it as a true story, a piece of lost history passed down with great care. In his writings, a man named Critias tells the tale, claiming he heard it from his grandfather, who heard it from the famous Athenian statesman Solon. While traveling in Egypt around 600 BC, Solon was supposedly shown temple records by Egyptian priests who had preserved the story for thousands of years. According to them, Atlantis rose and fell 9,000 years before their time. Do the math, and that puts Atlantis around 9,600 BC, a staggering 11,600 years ago. This timeline is what makes the story so provocative. It places Atlantis not in the familiar Bronze Age, but deep in the last Ice Age, a time when mainstream history tells us humans were living in small, scattered hunter-gatherer groups. Plato, speaking through Critias, describes Atlantis in vivid detail. It was a massive island, larger than ancient Libya and Asia Minor combined, located in the Atlantic Ocean just beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. This was a naval superpower. Its kings, said to be descendants of the sea god Poseidon, ruled over 10 kingdoms on the island. Their influence was enormous. Their armies had conquered parts of Europe and Africa, carving out an empire that stretched deep into the Mediterranean. The capital city was an engineering spectacle. Built on a hill, it was protected by 3 rings of water and 2 of land, supposedly created by Poseidon himself. These rings were connected by massive canals that allowed ships to sail directly into the heart of the city, creating a series of protected harbors. The city walls gleamed with precious metals, the outer wall coated in brass, the middle in tin, and the inner wall flashed with the red light of orichalcum. Orichalcum, a metal Plato describes as second only to gold, is one of history's great mysteries, a symbol of the island's almost unbelievable wealth. The land itself was incredibly fertile, producing 2 harvests a year. Elephants roamed its plains. A complex network of irrigation canals crisscrossed a great plain at the island's center, showing their advanced understanding of agriculture. The city had temples, palaces, public baths with hot and cold running water, and a huge harbor buzzing with merchants from across their empire. But Plato's story isn't just a postcard from paradise. At its core, it's a morality play. He contrasts the magnificent but corrupt Atlanteans with a smaller, more virtuous prehistoric Athens. The Atlanteans, once noble, became consumed by greed and arrogance. Their divine nature weakened as it was diluted over generations. They then launched an unjust war to conquer everyone else. This moral rot sealed their fate. After their armies were finally stopped by the Proto-Athenians, the gods turned on them. The island was rocked by violent earthquakes and floods. And then, in a single day and a single night of misfortune, the entire continent of Atlantis, with all its power, sank beneath the waves and vanished forever. This is the story Plato told. But did he mean it as literal history? The overwhelming consensus among modern scholars is no. They argue that Atlantis was a sophisticated fable Plato created to explore his ideas about ideal societies, the dangers of empire, and the clash between wealth and virtue. He might have been inspired by real events, like the volcanic eruption that destroyed the island of Thera around 1600 B.C., but there are no other ancient texts that even mention Atlantis. It seems to be a ghost that lives only in Plato's work. And yet, the story feels too specific to be just a fairy tale. Plato's insistence that it was a true account has fueled a search that continues to this day, compelling us to ask, what if Plato wasn't just telling a story? What if he was preserving a memory, the city of wonders, a technological marvel? If we entertain the idea that Atlantis was real, we step into a world where history, myth, and science fiction collide. While Plato described incredible engineering, later writers, especially in the 19th and 20th centuries, gave Atlantis technologies that sound futuristic even today. These are the ideas that turned Atlantis from a lost kingdom into a legend of a civilization beyond its time. Let's be perfectly clear. These technologies, flying machines, energy crystals, genetic engineering, are not in Plato's original text. They are modern additions, mostly for mystics and the psychic readings of people like American clairvoyant Edgar Cayce in the early 1900s. While they have no basis in historical fact, they've become a huge part of the modern Atlantis legend. So, let's explore this vision of a hyper-advanced Atlantis, built by the modern imagination. At the heart of this technological paradise was its power source, the Great Crystal, also known as the Tuohy Stone or Firestone. Imagine a giant six-sided crystal, housed in a temple with a retractable dome that could expose it to the sun, moon, and stars. According to these esoteric accounts, the crystal was a cosmic accumulator, drawing in and amplifying energy from the earth and the sky. This energy was then broadcast wirelessly to power homes, cities, and their most amazing machines. This crystal tech was supposedly used for more than just power. It was said to be a spiritual tool for communicating with higher states of consciousness, and was even used for healing and rejuvenation, with claims that it could regenerate tissues and dramatically extend lifespans, an idea that sounds eerily like modern experiments with light and sound therapy. But the most spectacular use of this crystal power was for transportation. Modern legends are filled with descriptions of Atlantean flying machines, sometimes called vimanas, a term borrowed from ancient Sanskrit texts that have no actual connection to Plato's story. These weren't clunky prototypes. They were described as ships that could travel through the air, over the water, and even underwater with incredible speed. They were supposedly powered by energy beamed from the Great Crystal, suggesting a kind of resonant power transfer or even anti-gravity. It paints a picture of a clean, silent, and hyper-efficient society. Beyond energy and transport, there are mentions of devices that sound like televisions and long-range communication tools. There are claims of advanced genetic engineering, where Atlanteans not only perfected agriculture, but also created part animal, part human hybrids to use as a labor force, a dark twist on their utopia. Even Plato's version of the city was an engineering marvel, creating perfectly concentric rings of land and water on that scale suggests a mastery of geology and earth moving that is hard to fathom. The canals, tunnels, and underground plumbing all point to a society with public works projects that would be ambitious, even by today, as standards. According to the legend, though, this incredible technology held the seeds of its own destruction. As the Atlanteans became more corrupt, their use of the Great Crystal shifted from constructive to destructive. The healing tool became a terrifying weapon, a death ray capable of immense devastation. The final cataclysm, in this version, wasn't just a natural disaster. It was self-inflicted. In their arrogance, the Atlanteans pushed the crystal beyond its limits, causing a catastrophic overload that triggered the earthquakes and floods that sank their continent. Their greatest achievement became their ultimate undoing. It's a powerful story, but we have to separate the threads. The amazing engineering is from Plato. The energy crystals and flying ships are from the modern imagination. Powerful what-ifs layered on top of the original legend. They have no historical basis, yet they show our profound desire to believe that such a civilization was possible. We're exploring one of history's greatest mysteries. If you find lost legends in ancient technologies as fascinating as we do, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. We have so much more to investigate together, from forgotten civilizations to unexplained phenomena. Don't miss out. The Hunt for a Lost Empire, Evidence and Theories. The story of Atlantis leaves us with one burning question. If it existed, where is it? For centuries, this question has launched expeditions and fueled endless debate. The Hunt for Atlantis is a global detective story, with clues that are both tantalizing and maddeningly elusive. The most obvious place to start is where Plato told us to look, in the Atlantic Ocean, beyond the Pillars of Hercules. For early believers like the 19th century writer Ignatius Donnelly, who revived modern interest in the legend, this was literal. He imagined a mid-Atlantic continent that was the mother culture for all ancient civilizations. The problem? Modern science. Ocean floor mapping has given us a detailed picture of the Atlantic seabed, and there is simply no evidence of a sunken continent. The mid-Atlantic ridge is where the Earth's crust is being created, not where continents go to die. Science is clear on this. The Atlantic does not hold Plato's Atlantis. With the Atlantic coming up empty, the search turned elsewhere. One of the most visually compelling theories centers on a geological formation in the Sahara Desert of Ev, Mauritania, the Richet structure or the Eye of the Sahara. At a glance, the resemblance is uncanny. It's a massive eroded dome with near-perfect concentric rings, just like Plato's description of the capital. But geologists have confirmed the Richet structure is an entirely natural formation, about 100 million years old, that has eroded over time. It was never an island. It sits at over 1,400 feet of elevation, and most importantly, there isn't a single shred of archaeological evidence. No ruins, no artifacts, no pottery, to suggest a grand metropolis was ever there. Another famous candidate is the Bimini Road in the Bahamas. Discovered in 1968, it's an underwater formation of large, limestone blocks arranged in a neat line, looking like an ancient road or wall. The discovery was especially thrilling because it matched a prediction by Edgar Cayce that remnants of Atlantis would be found near Bimini. For years, believers hailed it as physical proof. However, rigorous study concluded it's a natural formation called beach rock, which forms when sand and shells are cemented together. As sea levels rose, the rock was submerged and fractured into the block-like shapes we see today. It's only a few thousand years old, far too young for Plato's timeline. This brings us to what many consider the most plausible scientific hypothesis, the one that connects Plato's legend to a real historical catastrophe. The Minoan eruption on the island of Thera, now Santorini. Around 1600 BC, the advanced Minoan civilization dominated the Aegean Sea. They were a sophisticated maritime culture. Their outpost on Thera was a massive volcano, and when it erupted, it was one of the largest in human history. It blew the center out of the island, triggered enormous tsunamis that slammed into the coast of Crete, and buried the town of Akrotiri in ash, preserving it perfectly. The parallels are compelling. A powerful island civilization destroyed by a cataclysm involving the sea. But there are major problems. Plato puts Atlantis 9,000 years before his time. The Thera eruption was only 1,200 years before him. He described a continent in the Atlantic, not a small island in the Aegean. The Minoan hypothesis is a fascinating historical echo, but it's not a perfect match. The search continues. In recent years, researcher Michael Donnellan has claimed to have found submerged structures off the coast of Spain using sonar, near the Strait of Gibraltar, dating to the right time period. While intriguing, these claims remain unverified by mainstream science as of 2025. After centuries of looking, not one definitive piece of evidence for Atlantis has ever been found. No inscription, no unique artifact, no ruin. The lost city remains just that, lost. The Great Cataclysm, a warning through time. Let's return to the final, dramatic act of Plato's story. Because beyond the gleaming city, the heart of the Atlantis legend is its apocalyptic end, a timeless warning about the fragility of civilization. In the final days, the Atlantean Empire is at its peak, but it's rotting from the inside. Plato paints a picture of moral decay. The divine essence of their ancestors has thinned, and human greed and arrogance have taken over. They are no longer happy with their paradise. They launch a military campaign to conquer the known world. They represent brute force and a society that has forgotten its virtue. Here, Plato introduces his heroes, an ancient, idealized Athens. They are the opposite of Atlantis, less wealthy, but courageous and virtuous. In a great battle, these noble Athenians defeat the mighty Atlantean forces, halting their conquest. But the final judgment for Atlantis comes from the gods. As Plato wrote, but at a later time there occurred violent earthquakes and floods. And in a single day and night of misfortune... the island of Atlantis in like manner disappeared in the depths of the sea. Picture it. The earth heaves, temples crumble, bridges shatter, fissures rip across the plains. Then the ocean, the source of their power, becomes their tomb. Colossal waves surge over the island. The ingenious canals now just channel the floodwaters directly into the capital. In just 24 hours, an entire civilization and its people are erased from existence. When the sun rises, there is nothing left but an impassable sea of mud. This is the philosophical core of the story. For Plato, it's an allegory showing that no amount of technology or wealth can save a society that has lost its moral compass. It's a cautionary tale about hubris, the pride that leads men to think they're equal to gods. If you connect this to the modern myths, the fall becomes even more tragic. The idea that the Atlanteans destroyed themselves by misusing their great crystal transforms the story from divine punishment into technological suicide. It's a self-inflicted wound, a consequence of unchecked ambition. This version resonates deeply today as we grapple with the potentially world-ending consequences of our own technologies. Whether you see the Great Cataclysm as history, geology, or philosophy, its power is undeniable. It reminds us that civilizations can fall, knowledge can be lost, and the ocean can swallow our grandest designs. The end of Atlantis forces us to look at our own world and ask a sobering question. Are we heeding the warning? The legacy of the survivors? A global conspiracy? Plato's story ends with total destruction. But in the world of myth, endings are rarely so final. A popular theory asks, what if some Atlanteans saw the disaster coming and managed to escape? This is the survivor theory. The idea is that a few Atlantean refugees, carrying the high knowledge of their civilization, fled the cataclysm and spread out across the globe. In this telling, they become the civilizer gods found in the myths of many ancient cultures' mysterious figures who arrived by sea, taught primitive locals the arts of civilization, and then disappeared. This theory tries to solve one of ancient history's great puzzles. Why did sophisticated civilizations in Egypt and Mesoamerica, separated by an ocean, both build pyramids? How did ancient peoples develop complex astronomy and mathematics that seem beyond their means? The survivor theory offers a simple answer. they were taught. The pyramids of Egypt and the ziggurats of the Americas are seen as echoes of a single, lost mother culture. Proponents point to ancient maps that seem to show Antarctica without ice, or to the impossible stonework at sites like Pumapunku in Bolivia as fingerprints of lost Atlantean knowledge. The Edgar Cayce readings took this even further, claiming Atlantean refugees helped build the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx, not as tombs, but as repositories of knowledge. He even claimed a secret hall of records lies hidden beneath the Sphinx, containing the complete history of Atlantis, waiting for us to find it. It's a seductive narrative. It weaves the world's greatest mysteries into a single grand, unified theory. But from a scientific standpoint, the survivor theory completely collapses. There is zero credible archaeological, genetic, or linguistic evidence to support it. The similarities between cultures are far better explained by different peoples independently, arriving at similar solutions. Building a tall, stable structure often leads to a pyramid shape, whether you're in Giza or Palenque. Genetic studies show no trace of a hyper-advanced group suddenly appearing around the globe. Mainstream science has provided solid, evidence-based timelines for these monuments. The Great Pyramid is firmly dated to the Pharaoh Khufu, the civilizations of the Americas. Developed in total isolation, the Atlantis survivor narrative is a modern myth. And in a way, it devalues the incredible achievements of our ancestors, crediting their ingenuity not to them, but to some mysterious outside force. The lingering mystery. So, what have we found on our journey? We've sailed through Plato's original tale, imagined crystal-powered cities, and hunted for evidence from the ocean depths to the desert sands. After nearly 2.5 millennia, Atlantis remains as elusive as ever. The overwhelming consensus of scientists and historians is firm. Atlantis is a myth, a brilliant and enduring fable created by Plato to teach us about politics, hubris, and virtue. In the world of hard evidence, there is no lost continent. Oceanography has mapped the seafloor where it was said to be, and it simply isn't there. And yet, the story refuses to die. Why does the legend of Atlantis hold such a powerful grip on our imagination? Perhaps it's because it embodies our deepest hopes and fears. The hope that we weren't the first, that there were others before us who were wiser and more advanced. It's the dream of a lost golden age whose secrets could solve our own problems. It also taps into our fear that our own civilization is fragile, that we too could be brought down.